Hi, everyone. This is Sam Silverman, Managing Partner of EB-5AN. Thank you for taking time to join us on today's webinar. Today, we're going to be chatting about EB-5 visa, source of funds, best practices for French investors. If you'd like a copy of the slides, please reach out to us at info@eb5an.com. And today's presentation will be both in English and in French. What are we going to cover today? This is a quick little table of contents overview. We're going to chat a little bit about EB-5AN. We'll talk to our guest panelist. We'll chat about source of funds considerations for French investors. We'll go through a short case study on a real EB-5 investment situation for a French investor. And we'll chat a bit about our Twin Lakes, Georgia $800,000 rural EB-5 project. First, a little bit about EB-5AN. We're a national leading EB-5 investment fund manager. We've worked with thousands of EB-5 investors from more than 60 countries over the last 10 years. This is a map showing where many of our investors have come from over the last 10 years. And this is another map showing the areas of the United States covered by our EB-5 regional center licenses. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Sam Silverman, one of the two managing partners of EB-5AN. My background and bio is there on the left-hand side. And my partner, Mike Schoenfeld, is listed here on the right side. Great. Now, I'll take a minute and quickly introduce our guest panelist, Karine Wenger. She's a partner at Fragamen, one of the most well-respected immigration law firms with a dedicated EB-5 practice. And I'll let Karine jump in and introduce herself and share a little bit about her experience practicing law and specifically about her experience working with EB-5 investors over the last 20 years.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Karine Wenger. I was born in France and immigrated to the States with my parents in the 80s. On an investor visa, actually, not the EB-5, but an E2 visa, and have done my schooling here in the United States, as you can see, and have been practicing U.S. immigration law over 20 years, including in the E2 EB-5 space with investors from around the world. Those that speak Spanish or French, I tend to work with, given my background. And I'm happy to be here today. Bonjour, je m'appelle Karine Wenger. Je suis née en France et immigrée aux États-Unis avec mes parents dans les années 80 sur un visa d'investisseur, pas le EB-5, mais le E2. Et bon, j'ai fait mes études aux États-Unis et j'exerce dans le droit d'immigration américain depuis plus de 20 ans. Des investisseurs de français et depuis plus de 20 ans. Content d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui.
Great. Thank you, Karine. All right, so now we're going to jump into the meat of today's presentation. And first, we're going to chat generally about source of funds and how does it fit in with an EB-5 visa application. So, Karine, do you want to kind of walk us through what is source of funds and why is it important? And then second, when doing an EB-5 application, what are kind of the 2 or 3 main things an investor needs to be aware of?
Sure. Yeah, source of funds is kind of the meat of the EB-5 piece from the investor. Investor must demonstrate evidence of the lawful source of the investment capital. The U.S. government wants to ensure that the funds that are being invested were lawfully obtained. So USCIS, the governing body overseeing this program in the U.S., will want to see that an investor has invested his or her own capital, that they're the legal owner of the capital invested, and that the capital was obtained through lawful means. And the key is to document the path of those funds from the moment that they were acquired to the time of the investment, and that the investment was made or is actively in the process of being made. Now, there are two components to the EB-5, the 526E petition. There's the project documentation explaining how the investment satisfies the EB-5 criteria, and then the source of funds. So USCIS must approve both components for the 526E, the application to be approved. And there's 5 criteria that we want to look at and really focus on. And the investment amount must meet the EB-5 requirements. So particularly we're looking at the 800,000 investment amount. Again, the investment capital was lawfully obtained. The capital was invested in a new commercial enterprise, and that NCE will be creating the required number of jobs. And as a reminder, the investor is actively involved, considered to be actively involved. Alors, la première chose dont on a discuté, c'est la source de fonds dans le contexte de EB-5. Que signifie source de fonds? Pour le EB-5, il faut documenter la source de fonds, c'est-à-dire que le capital de l'investisseur vient d'une ou de plusieurs sources légales. Le gouvernement américain doit être convaincu que les fonds ont été obtenus légalement et l'investisseur de l'EB-5 doit investir son propre capital, doit établir qu'il est le propriétaire du capital investi et qu'il a obtenu le capital par des moyens licites. Il est après indispensable de documenter le cheminement des fonds pour établir que l'investissement a été réalisé ou est activement en train d'être réalisé. Il y a 2 parties importantes de la pétition I-526P. La documentation du projet en expliquant comment l'investissement satisfait les critères du EB-5 et la documentation de la source des fonds montrant que le capital d'investissement est éligible. USCIS, l'agence d'immigration du gouvernement américain, doit approuver ces 2 composantes pour que la pétition I-526 soit approuvée. Il y a donc 5 critères à considérer. Le montant de l'investissement répond aux exigences de l'EB-5, soit les 800 000 $ d'investissement. Le capital investi a été obtenu légalement. Le capital a été investi dans une nouvelle entreprise commerciale et c'est cette LCE qui va créer le nombre d'emplois investis. L'investisseur est aussi activement impliqué dans la LCE. Il est important à savoir que la documentation sur la source des fonds doit être complétée avant de transférer les fonds au projet ou de soumettre la pétition I-526. As a note, it's important to note that the source of funds documentation needs to be completed before wiring the funds to the project or submitting the I-526 petition.
Okay, great. That all makes sense. Okay, so now that we know generally what source of funds is and why it's important, let's talk about some real world sources of funds that are commonly used. So how do you think about documenting the most common sources, and what are the most common sources that your clients use?
Yeah, most commonly, the top 4 here, I think, are the most commonly used sources of funds for EB-5 investments. So you've got money earned by the investor, spouse, capital gains, so money earned as a result of the sale of an asset or a gain on investment, gifts or inheritance from family, friends. Usually it's money that's gifted outright with no expectation of repayment to the investor. And then there's loans, and certainly loans could be money lent to the investor, a third party, whether it's family, friends, or financial institutions, and those have to be at market terms. It's important that the taxes due on all income or gifts must have been paid to the respective government institutions. So that will be a recurring theme throughout. So this presentation is ensuring that the tax compliance is there. On a parlé donc de sources de fonds. Quels sont des exemples de sources communes de fonds pour les investissements en EB-5? Il y en a quatre principales. Le revenu ordinaire, donc l'argent acquis par un investisseur, c'est un conjoint. Les plus-values, c'est-à-dire l'argent obtenu par l'investisseur grâce à la vente d'un bien pour un gain sur investissement. Ça peut être un don ou un héritage de famille ou d'amis, par exemple. L'argent peut donner directement sans attendre de remboursement à l'investisseur ou des fonds hérités par l'investisseur. Et puis, des prêts de famille, d'amis ou d'entreprise, donc des prêts de partie tierce à l'investisseur qui doivent être au taux d'intérêt actuel selon les conditions du marché. À savoir que tout impôt dû sur tous les revenus doivent avoir été payés aux institutions gouvernementales respectives.
Perfect. All right, now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into each of those major topics. So focusing first on ordinary income. For investors who are sourcing funds from ordinary income, what are some of the best practices that you typically try to focus on when putting together those records?
Yes, for ordinary income, what's important is to determine, is it a self-employment? Is it income derived from self-employment or third-party employment? The documentation of what we need to show as far as acquiring the income will be a little different. Third-party employer, these pay stubs, employment contracts if one exists, employment verification letters, bank statements showing accumulation and maintenance of those funds. On the self-employment side, if it's your own, you started a company, we want to document the source of funds, where did the money come from to start the business, and then that the business was operational going forward, and that it was a legitimate business. So contracts, invoices, bank statements, both from the enterprise and the personal bank statements. And again, documenting the accumulation and maintenance of those funds as well going forward. Donc, pour la source, le scénario de source de fonds utilisant le revenu ordinaire, on va revoir des meilleures pratiques. Quelles sont les meilleures pratiques? Donc, déjà, dans un premier temps, c'est de déterminer si le revenu provient d'un emploi indépendant, c'est-à-dire une entreprise individuelle, ou d'un emploi pour une partie tierce. Parce que la documentation à soumettre va changer considérablement en fonction de l'employeur, de l'investisseur. Donc, en cas d'un emploi pour un tiers, partie tierce, on peut inclure des bulletins de paye, un contrat de travail, une lettre d'emploi, ainsi que des relevés bancaires montrant l'accumulation des revenus et le maintien des fonds. En cas d'un emploi indépendant, cela peut inclure la source des fonds utilisés pour démarrer l'entreprise, créer l'entreprise. Après, montrer que l'entreprise a continué à exister et pour des actions légitimes. Donc, des exemples de contrats, des factures, des bons de commande, des relevés bancaires aussi professionnels ainsi que personnels. Et aussi documenter l'accumulation et le maintien des efforts qui est nécessaire.
Great. So now continuing with ordinary income, but now talking about some of the problems. What are some of the roadblocks that you see when it comes to documenting ordinary income, particularly from France?
So, I mean, I think it's the ordinary income, you know, if it's your, sorry, sorry. So some of the common problems would be, you know, everything has to be translated. Sorry, we'll obviously start you up the transition, but I thought you were talking about the questions beforehand. So common problems for ordinary income, we have to show the money was earned by the investor, right? So again, really going back to the source and tracing it back. So whether it's the salary, sole proprietorship income, stock dividends, what have you. Each documentation submitted in a foreign language, non-English documents must include a certified translation in English, which could be expensive. You have to show tax returns showing income from all sources. So ensuring that all revenue, that taxes on all revenue earned has been paid, and then tracing the amount after tax and continuing to trace that to the amount of the funds that are being invested. So it does require extensive documentation as the money moves from the original source to some bank account to bank account and so on. Let me switch to function. Okay. Des problèmes à considérer en tant que documentation à fournir. Il faut documenter comment l'argent a été acquis par l'investisseur ou le conjoint. Donc, ceci peut être salaire, revenus d'entreprise individuelle, dividendes en actions, distribution de dividendes d'entreprise. Il est important à savoir que tout document produit en langue autre qu'anglais doit être accompagné d'une traduction certifiée en anglais. Donc, ça y compris les relevés d'emploi, les certificats de salaire, les preuves de distribution de dividendes, etc. Vous devez aussi documenter tout impôt, que tout impôt ont été payés. Donc, déclaration de revenus indiquant les revenus de toute source, preuve d'impôt, preuve que les impôts ont été payés et retenus, et que le montant des frais après impôt correspondent au montant des frais restants de l'État. C'est important, la chose la plus importante qui est faite, c'est de tracer le cheminement de la source du point d'origine au compte courant. Donc, documenter le système bancaire, montrant les fonds après impôt, entrant dans le fonds de l'investisseur, puis passant de compte à compte jusqu'au financement de l'investissement. Et si possible, en évitant de mélanger ces fonds de financement avec les frais.
Okay, great. So now let's shift gears and talk about another one of the most common sources, which is capital gains. So what is a capital gain? What are some real life examples of this, and how do you kind of go about, you know, trying to document this correctly so it gets approved?
Yeah, so for capital gains, you know, we focus on the principal investment made in the asset, like real property, equity, fixed deposits. If we're going to sell the real property, we want to document the income to fund the purchase price of the property, and then if a gain, a capital gain, were received from the sale of that property, including evidence of that, so the purchase and sale deeds, the bank statements for the properties, as well as the bank account for the investor. If it's a sale of a company, we do want to trace back the funds to the initial investment in the investor's company. We do have to show that the source of funds we have to show source of funds from the inception of the company together with tax returns, financial documents of the company, financial statements for the last 7 years. Want to register, show proof of the company registration, that it was engaged in lawful activity, and continue to engage in lawful activities. And then, of course, at the sale, providing receipts of the sale of the proceeds and the bank accounts to match that. And then any tax implications that would have must be taken care of as well. Donc, d'autres questions for you, Sam. So the questions below, do you want me to do those first in this English and then, like, do the whole thing in English and then switch over to French?
Yeah, I think do the whole thing in English
Okay.
and then French.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so some frequent questions. Do I need to provide the source of funds, the very first real estate purchase of the company, and then how do I document that to prove sources that may be outside of that document retention period? And I think that's the biggest challenge is, the further back you have to go in time to pull the source of funds, the harder it's going to be, the more challenging it's going to be. Certainly, if whatever documentation you were able to provide regarding the creation of the company, the organization of the company, an accountant perhaps, a letter, or public records, right, the better. You can certainly supplement with a declaration if needed to kind of fill in the gaps, but the idea is to tell the story. Where did the funds come from? To purchase the company, but then resulted in stress. OK, donc un autre scénario de source de fonds, les plus-values. Alors là, on peut se concentrer sur l'investissement principal, initial, réalisé dans des actifs tels que l'immobilier, les actions. Donc, dans le cas de l'immobilier, par exemple, vous allez documenter correctement les revenus utilisés pour financer le prix d'achat de la propriété en premier temps. Si des plus-values ont été obtenues grâce au retournement des biens, fournissez à ce moment-là les actes d'achat et de vente, ainsi que les relevés bancaires correspondant à toutes les propriétés, et menant à la propriété vendue pour financer l'investissement principal. Si c'est une vente d'entreprise, pour remonter les fonds jusqu'à l'investissement initial dans l'entreprise d'investisseurs. Donc là, il faut trouver la source des fonds depuis la création de l'entreprise, ainsi que les déclarations de revenus et les états financiers de l'entreprise des 7 dernières années. C'est difficile à documenter. Finalement, documenter l'enregistrement approprié et l'activité du site de l'entreprise et fournir des contrats de banque ou les relevés bancaires correspondants par les reçus du produit de la banque. Donc, certaines questions à considérer, c'est dois-je fournir la source de financement du premier bien immobilier acheté ou de la création de l'entreprise? Et comment puis-je fournir les documents requis de la source en dehors de la période de conservation des documents? Et donc, le mieux, oui, effectivement, c'est de documenter le cheminement de la source du point d'origine au compte courant, inclus chaque transfert de compte à compte. Bien sûr, cela devient un peu plus difficile à documenter si on remonte en arrière. Donc, il faut être créatif pour raconter l'histoire d'où viennent les fonds. Voir le registre national des entreprises comme justificatif, l'immatriculation d'une entreprise, peut-être obtenir des preuves secondaires comme une déclaration d'un comptable ou d'un business partner. Une autre question, c'est est-ce que les transactions peuvent être en espèces? Les transactions en espèces sont possibles, mais celles-ci doivent être documentées aussi. Et généralement, il y a aussi une autre preuve qui change a eu lieu, une email, un courrier, un texte. Il faut aussi considérer les implications de taxes des 50 à ce moment-là en vertu des lois locales.
Okay, great. All right, so now let's continue with capital gains, but talk about some of the main issues that you run into when trying to document that. Where do clients sometimes get tripped up?
Yeah, so for capital gains, again, same requirements as before, right? In the non-English documentation, want to make sure that you include a certified translation, that you demonstrate that the appropriate taxes have been paid, and then that you trace, right, from the funds from the original source after tax to the current account. So the challenge again is in the documentation. How and when did I buy this asset, right? Where did the money come from? How long ago was it? And do I have any kind of record of this transaction from originally? Which can be more challenging again the further back we go. Documenting then who that was sold to, what was the gain, again, depending on when that took place, what kind of documentation is available. On the last slide, there was a question of whether or not transactions can be done to be cash. Certainly those are fine, but the challenge might be with the documentation. What kind of evidence do we have that the transaction occurred? And so might need to get a little bit more creative here with respect to them telling the story. What kind of evidence is available to demonstrate a transfer has occurred? It might be an email, it might be a text. It was a long time ago, maybe not. Maybe a note on a napkin. But all evidence is available, and we would include that to tell the story. And hopefully we have some kind of record, public record that's available to support that. OK, donc pour les scénarios de plus-value, quels sont certains problèmes seulement considérés? Là encore, là, c'est le revenu obtenu par l'investisseur et son conjoint grâce à la vente d'un bien pour un gain sur investissement. Donc encore, là, les deux documents étrangers en langue étrangère doivent être traduits, là, ils doivent être accompagnés d'une traduction certifiée en anglais. Donc, le contrat de vente, l'évaluation d'actifs, le relevé bancaire, la déclaration des revenus. Il faut s'assurer que tous impôts ont été payés. Et encore, le plus délicat, c'est démontrer et tracer le cheminement de la source du point d'origine. Donc là, les questions à considérer, c'est quand et comment avez-vous acquis ce bien? D'où vient l'argent utilisé pour faire ça? Quand et à qui l'avez-vous vendu? Quel était votre gain? Quels impôts ont été payés? Et où sont passés les fonds après les impôts depuis la vente aujourd'hui? Donc, c'est chaque étape qui doit être vraiment documentée. La difficulté, évidemment, c'est l'achat du bien d'origine a eu lieu il y a plusieurs années. Vous n'avez peut-être pas la documentation qu'il faut. Donc, il faut être un peu plus créatif là et voir quelles ressources sont disponibles, quelle documentation peut-être vous devez obtenir des registres d'entreprise, du gouvernement et supplémenter à ce moment-là, peut-être avec une déclaration de l'investisseur pour compléter le cheminement de.
Okay, great. All right, now on to another topic that a lot of investors also rely on as a source for their investment, gifts and inheritance. So what are some of the things that you want to encourage clients to start thinking about when they're coming to you and saying, hey, I've inherited some money, or I'm getting a gift from a relative? What do you kind of want to make those investors aware of?
Yeah, sure. So for gifts or inheritance, you know, one, you have to show that you are the rightful owner, right, heir of the assets, and so proving that in an inheritance, you could hopefully there's a will or a trust, but otherwise, if none exists, certainly looking to the local rules of succession, intestate for succession specifically. And then you have to show how the initial asset was purchased by the donor. Again, source of funds is critical here to show that the funds were lawfully obtained, and then tracing the funds to an origin to the investor. Do I need to document the source of funds utilized by my donor for the purchase of assets? Again, or my relative died intestate. How do I prove that? Again, it will depend on the circumstance, but certainly looking at the local laws will be helpful in showing what the relationship perhaps with the investor, and also that they were the rightful heir to the assets. With respect to gifts, there's you're not going to have a testament, a will, so some sort of written documentation to show clear intent that the donor did intend for the investor to be the recipient of the gift, showing a transfer of funds from one bank account to the other. And those the gifts should not be with an expectation of repayment there. And the last, can I borrow utilizing my inheritance as collateral? Yes, you can certainly do that once you do Okay. Un autre scénario de source de fonds, ça serait en utilisant des dons ou héritage de famille ou amis. Donc là, il faut établir que l'investisseur est l'héritier légitime des actifs anticipants et de documenter comment l'actif initial a été acheté par le donateur. Donc là, pour un héritage, il faudrait fournir toujours un testament de volonté, s'il est disponible. Si celui-ci n'existe pas, vous pouvez aussi fournir les règles locales de succession ad intestat. De plus, pour documenter la source de fonds, il vous faut fournir donc preuve de la manière dont les biens hérités ont été acquis par le donateur. Les preuves peuvent prendre la forme de déclaration sur serment du donateur et ou de tiers commissaires. Mais des documents prouvant la source de fonds du donateur sont beaucoup plus sûrs, certainement. Certaines questions sur lesquelles réfléchir. Dois-je documenter la source des fonds utilisée par le donateur pour l'achat d'actifs? Oui, la preuve des sources est indispensable. Le gouvernement veut s'assurer que les fonds ont été acquis légalement et rendront les dossiers plus sûrs. Cette documentation peut inclure des bulletins de paie, des contrats de travail, des d'emploi. Ensuite, pour l'héritage, mon proche est décédé à une stade, alors comment puis-je fournir une preuve d'héritage? C'est sûr qu'un testament de volonté serait la meilleure preuve, mais si cela n'existe pas, il pourrait fournir la loi locale de succession pour prouver que vous êtes en fait l'héritier légitime de ce don. Et peut-être aussi inclure une déclaration d'un avocat ou un notaire expliquant cette loi, preuve de droit d'héritage. Et dans l'instant où, dès l'instant où vous avez droit à l'héritage, vous pouvez l'utiliser comme garant.
Okay, great. All right, so now let's continue, but talk about some of the issues. And I know you touched on that briefly, but what are some of the problems that you see when clients are trying to document gifts inheritance? Maybe it's been a long time, or the friend doesn't want to share some of the financial documents. What are some of the issues that you try and kind of flag and figure a way to deal with early on?
Yeah, so if it's a gift or an inheritance from friends, family, the one piece about is the money, are you the rightful owner of the money now? Was it given with no expectation of repayment? So that's an important piece of it as well. Have all of the taxes been paid as a result? So probate taxes, gift taxes that might apply. And then, of course, tracing the source of funds from the donor could be a challenge. Certainly, if it's an inheritance, it might be a little bit easier. The documentation might include proof of the donor's employment, history, maybe they pensions, investments, that sort of thing that was included in the family trust that was now inherited. There may be, you could obtain a declaration perhaps from the family accountant or the state attorney to further support that. Hard evidence, obviously, the objective evidence, the documentation itself is the best in making the case as strong as possible. But it's not unusual to include secondary evidence to kind of fill in some of the gaps there. Okay. Quels sont donc les certains problèmes peut-être avec les dons ou scénarios d'héritage de famille et amis? Donc, quand il s'agit d'un don d'argent sans attente de remboursement, ou alors ce sont des fonds hérités par l'investisseur. Donc, encore, certains problèmes peut-être de montrer que tous les impôts ont été payés, donc déclaration de revenus, tout un peu sur de succession ont été payés, passer le cheminement des sources du point d'origine après les impôts depuis le don ou l'héritage. Et ça peut être un peu difficile à prouver. Peut-être qu'on n'a pas de documentation. Décédé, et à ce moment-là, il faudrait peut-être revoir avec un notaire, revoir documenter l'emploi pour montrer la source d'origine de ce don ou de l'héritage. La documentation plus sûre, c'est la documentation même, mais c'est dit, On peut toujours inclure des preuves secondaires, des documentations secondaires, voire une déclaration militaire, une déclaration d'avocat ou autre, pour compléter l'histoire et bien tracer les faits de la source scientifique.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So let's go on to the fourth major source of funds, which is loans. So why do people take loans, and what are some of the main things to be aware of if you're going to use a loan from a bank, an individual, a co-op, to fund part of the source?
Yeah, so you can certainly, loans are a great source of funds. Loans from third parties, certainly. Look at a personal loan, a commercial bank. It can also be a loan from an individual or a non-financial institution. And so the terms have to be comparable, right, to those commercial bank loans. The best practice would be to provide evidence of how the investor acquired that asset that is going to be used as collateral to the loan. And if you are able to get an uncollateralized loan from a financial institution, sure, that's ideal. It's less evidence to submit and to your source of for the collateral. When borrowing from a company, bank, or a company, you have to provide the evidence that the enterprise was established and was lawfully operated. So an investor might borrow against their own company, you have to show that the company was the source of funds to establish the company, and that the company is lawfully operating in order to provide that source of funds, and that they're in good financial state. From the documentation perspective, this does include quite a bit of documentation, certainly. Not only the ownership of the collateral, how did the investor obtain that collateral? What was the source of funds to obtain the collateral? And then what's the value of the collateral asset, so that it's either equal or it exceeds the value of the loan. And it should include information in the event of default. So is a bank loan without collateral the easiest option? From a documentation perspective, certainly. How feasible is it to obtain from a bank? That might be a little bit more challenging. But and so folks might turn to personal loans from a friend, in those situations. But the loan has to have terms comparable to the commercial, right? So it can be an interest-free loan because that looks like a gift, right? The difference. And so, can I simply state that the funds are gifts from friends and family? Yes, but then it's a gift. And the documentation is different, and tax implications are different as well. OK. La dernière suite des fonds à voir, c'est les prêts de partie tierce. Quelles sont les meilleures pratiques à considérer? Donc, un prêt personnel doit avoir les mêmes conditions comparables à celles d'un prêt bancaire commercial. Donc, dans le cas d'un prêt auprès d'une personne ou d'une institution non financière, le prêteur doit fournir des documents attestant de l'origine des fonds. Donc là, vous devez fournir preuve de la manière dont l'investisseur a acquis l'actif utilisé comme garantie. L'option idéale consiste à acquérir un prêt non garanti auprès d'une institution financière. Cela évite les problèmes de preuve de la sûreté garantie, mais peut-être assez difficile à source des fonds du prêteur. Donc, lorsque vous empruntez auprès d'une entreprise, on va fournir la preuve de la création et des opérations légales de l'entreprise, la preuve de la propriété de l'investisseur dans l'entreprise, le cas échéant, la valeur de la propriété de l'investisseur, la situation financière de l'entreprise, y compris des déclarations de revenus et l'état fiscal de l'entreprise, pour s'assurer que l'entreprise est légitime. Il faudra aussi documenter la preuve de la garantie, un rapport d'évaluation de l'actif garanti et une preuve de la capacité du prêteur à saisir en cas de non-paiement du prêt. Donc, si la garantie doit être égale la valeur de la garantie doit être égale à la valeur du prêt ou doit être au-dessus du montant du prêt. Donc, les questions à revoir, est-ce qu'un prêt bancaire sans garantie est l'option la plus simple? Et dans quelle mesure est-ce réalisable? C'est sûr qu'un prêt bancaire sans garantie serait l'option la plus simple, mais peut-être difficile à obtenir. Les prêts sans garantie parviennent souvent d'année en année. Il faut documenter la suite des prêts en le remboursement du prêt. Tout simplement dire que les fonds sont encadrés d'un niveau de famille au lieu d'un prêt. Oui, c'est sûr, mais enfin, ça sera, à ce moment-là, c'est un don, non pas un prêt. Il y a une distinction entre les deux. Chacun a des critères différents. Un don, un cadeau doit être sans attendre de remboursement, alors qu'un prêt personnel doit avoir des termes assez de prêts bancaires. Donc, par exemple, si un taux d'intérêt est trop bas, alors peut-être que c'est une prêt, mais c'est considéré comme un don. Chacun a leur propre conséquences sociales, leur possibilité, ainsi que les conséquences ou des taux de paiement.
Okay. All right, and then lastly, let's talk about some of the problems that come up when dealing with loans.
Okay, so when dealing with loans, again, the money lent to the investor to be at market terms from a third party, and then against sufficient assets owned by the investor as a guarantee. Certified translation applies, ensuring that all relevant taxes have been paid, and then tracing the source funds to the current account. So, how did the lender obtain the funds? Were they legally earned? Taxes have been paid. Talked about, paying the funds to the loans, their own company against their own company, and then how the investor used the funds since obtaining them from the lender before placing those funds in. So, what happened to those funds subsequently? When tracing every step of the way. So some questions to consider, or issues to consider. How and when did buy the assets? Where did you get the money to purchase it? Who is the lender? What are the terms of the loan? What is there repayment provision in there? Is there default provision? The terms of the loan, at market terms, or does it look more to that loan as to be considered? Yes. Is it a secured loan? Do you have collateral? And is that collateral sufficient? Is the collateral been evaluated so that it at least covers the loan? Or it's OK. Donc, pour les frais de partie tierce, il y a certaines considérations à avoir. Enfin, quand on parle d'argent prêté à l'investisseur ou au conjoint, aux conditions financées par un tiers contre des actifs suffisants appartenant à l'investisseur avec une garantie personnelle. Donc, à considérer le point de vue documentation, tout document doit être traduit en anglais, notamment le contrat de prêt, la note, la garantie personnelle, le privilège hypothécaire, le relevé bancaire, déclaration du revenu, tout impôt pertinent du public, et continuer à passer comment est-ce que le prêteur a obtenu ses fonds, c'est légal, les impôts ont été payés, et comment l'investisseur a utilisé ses fonds une fois reçus. Vraiment passer de 26 du financement. Donc, des questions à poser. Comment et quand avez-vous acheté cet actif utilisé pour garantie? D'où vient l'argent utilisé pour l'acheter? Qui est le prêteur? La relation entre l'investisseur et le prêteur. Quelles sont les conditions du prêt? Encore, il faut que ce soit en termes de marché, conditions. Le prêt a-t-il été garanti par un bien immobilier et est-ce que la garantie est suffisante? Donc, la garantie, généralement, la garantie sera la valeur de l'actif mise en garantie et celui-ci doit être égal et au-dessus du numéro. Et donc, c'est important de parler avec un comptable, certainement, pour vraiment passer tous ces points.
Okay, great. All right, so now let's shift gears and talk through a real case study example for how we put a couple of these different pieces together for an EB-5 investor. So here we've got a structure where a friend of the investor is a US national who's earned income from a digital consulting business, a self-proprietorship, let's say, and the friend has agreed to loan the money to a French investor who has a piece of real estate in Paris. So, Corinne, do you want to kind of walk us through the different steps and documents that are going to be needed for both of these individuals that are going to be shared?
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so to start, on the French investor side, French national will want to, please provide documentation of his identity, so nationality, passport, birth certificate, and his ownership and right to the multi-family apartment building in Paris, and how that was obtained, right? The source of funds used to purchase that asset, that his ownership of that asset. Then also proving the value of the asset currently. We want to make sure that the value is at least the 800,000 loan that we should be receiving. That's collateral for the loan. Now, this is a very simplified version because obviously the source of funds used to purchase the asset might have had several steps leading to it. And so that's important to think about is going backwards on the initial source of those funds ultimately is just be a part of it. Then we look to the loan agreement itself, and the documentation there. The loan agreement is supported, the terms of the agreement with respect to personal fee, and then terms of foreclosure or default situation. With respect to the friend who's the lender, he's 100% owner of the digital consulting business, so the ownership there, and help you establish that business. That it is a legally established business, that it legally operates. So the corporation documentation there. Now, if it's a business that was established decades ago, depending on the country, the record keeping may not be so clear today. So that's where we must have to give a big creative to how to demonstrate the business when it was established and what the capital used to establish that business. We want to then show that he's earning income from he's using that income from the company to loan the 800,000 to his friend. Here we have show that he is earning 300,000 after tax per year. We've got some tax documentation to show that over the last 5 years. We'll probably need 7 years of documentation there for him, but at least for 5 years, so that he meets that threshold that those are something probably considered as expensive as well. So those are some issues to think about there. And then with respect to the tax returns, we talked about personal tax returns, but the company tax returns are also relevant here to show, again, that the business is lawfully operated. The income is legally earned, and then some identification documents. Okay, on a une étude de cas, là, donc un 16 garantis par un bien immobilier. Nous avons un autre investisseur du EB-5 en français. Il va obtenir un prêt hypothécaire de 800 000 $ contre l'immeuble à Paris en tant que garantie. Il va obtenir ce prêt d'un ami, un Américain, qui lui est propriétaire à 5% d'un business de digital consulting. Donc voilà, voyons ce qu'on doit, quelle sorte de documentation Alors, en premier temps, preuve de l'identité de l'investisseur, donc un bachelor en agriculture, avec traduction certifiée en anglais, bien sûr. Il va utiliser un immeuble d'appartement familial à Paris, donc il est propriétaire à 100%. Donc, il va falloir documenter qu'il a en effet à 100% de l'immeuble. Donc, la documentation là-dessus. Que cet actif est légitime. Donc, inclure comme preuve une évaluation de la valeur de l'actif. est plus que le montant du prêt. Il va falloir aussi documenter comment l'investisseur a obtenu cette attribution. Pour ce qui est utilisé systématique, une documentation de succession, mais pas comment le titre a été transmis, des versements et montrer les versements des bénéficiaires à l'extension. Donc après, on se concentre sur le contrat de prêt, documenter l'hypothèque enregistrée dans les archives publiques, la garantie personnelle, la note, les conditions pour saisir l'actif en cas de défaut, donc les termes du prêt. Et le prêt hypothécaire vient donc d'un ami, un Américain, qui est propriétaire à 100% d'une entreprise aussi, comme on dit. Et donc, il faut regarder, donc, il dit bien l'origine de l'argent du prêt. Donc là, on a un revenu ordinaire gagné par son impôt indépendant. Il nous faut alors prouver que l'entreprise est légale en fournissant des documents de constitution d'entreprise, d'accord d'exploitation, ainsi que déclaration d'impôt d'entreprise pour montrer qu'il y a continué d'exister et que les sources de fonds, les revenus de cette année est légal. Il faudra aussi montrer les sources de fonds utilisées pour démarrer l'entreprise. Les revenus des prêteurs, les services, et aussi, bien sûr, les déclarations de revenus personnels et des entreprises pour montrer que c'est payé. Donc là, dans notre exemple, on voit que l'année reçoit un revenu de 300 000 $ annuels depuis 5 ans. Donc, on a des déclarations de revenus. Le montant dépasse le montant du prêt. Donc, il faudra voir quand même ses dépenses. Peut-être remonter un peu plus de 5 ans, 7 ans, pour montrer que effectivement le montant de prêt il a suffisamment de revenus pour et finalement la relation entre le prêteur avec l'investisseur, donc c'est une déclaration de circulation, ainsi que des documents de pièce d'identité, le passeport, la.
All right, great. And let's just spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about how all of these documents come together in the source of funds cover letter. What is the cover letter? What is its purpose, and how do all these records and things kind of fit together into that?
Yeah, so the cover letter is going to tell the story, right? Lay out all of the source of funds that are being used, and each going to tell the story from as detailed as possible, from start to finish, supported by the necessary evidence that's available. That will be included. Donc, la partie du dossier consiste d'une lettre de couverture, et dans cette lettre, c'est là où soit des sources de fonds vont être expliquées et documentées du début jusqu'à la fin. Le cheminement des fonds va être tracé à chaque étape et documenté avec des preuves, des documents même, ou alors peut-être des preuves secondaires si les documents.
Just for everyone's reference, these are some more details on some of the exhibits that could be required. as part of the cover letter. So this is obviously going to change based on the situation that the investor has and what their sources are, but just to provide a general idea of how many documents and what types of records are going to be needed. All right. So before we wrap up, we'll spend just a few minutes chatting about our Twin Lakes, Georgia rural EB-5 project, and then we'll hear from Karine about the next steps and what things investors should consider if they're going to make an EB-5 investment in the near future. The Twin Lakes, Georgia rural EB-5 project follows 14 prior EB-5AN projects with the Coulter Group, one of the largest developers in the southeastern United States. This is a summary of some of the prior projects, EB-5 projects, that EB-5AN has done with Coulter over the last 10 years. Under the current rules, which just went into effect about a year ago, EB-5 investors who are already in the United States, those on H-1B, E-2, F-1, and L-1 visas, are eligible for what's called concurrent filing. So for those investors already in the US, if their country category is current, then they can simultaneously with their application for the green card, they can also request a flexible EAD or employment authorization document, and we're seeing those get issued in just a few months. So prior to receiving the actual green card, investors can acquire a work permit, which will allow them to work and remain legally in the US while they're waiting for the green card to be issued. The Twin Lakes, Georgia EB-5 project is the development of a single family home community, approximately 1,300 homes total. More than 550 homes have already been sold. And as you can see from the photo here on the left, hundreds and hundreds of homes have already been built and delivered to buyers. Coulter as a company is one of the largest private home builders in the US. Construction's been underway for about 4 years. Given the advanced state of construction, the project's created already more than 2,000 jobs, which means that more than 10 jobs have already been created for each EB-5 investor. The project has a senior revolving construction loan with Third Coast Bank, and the total cost is almost $700 million, with EB-5 making up approximately $80 million in this fund. Twin Lakes, Georgia is one of 13 Crestwind branded active adult communities. Active adult meaning 55 and up is the restriction for buyers to purchase homes. This business model is a proven model. Many of these communities have sold hundreds of homes. Some of them are already completed. And so this is one of 13 of the same type of active adult retirement single family home communities that Coulter is developing across the Southeast. The project features 3 unique guarantees from one of Coulter's parent companies: a repayment guarantee, an I-5260 approval refund guarantee, and a job creation guarantee. When we look at Coulter's status in this active adult market in the Atlanta metro area, looking at the most recent year, we can see that Coulter was the most successful developer, even when compared against some of the largest publicly traded companies, including Lennar and Pulte Group, that are even larger than Coulter. This is a market that Coulter has really figured out how to succeed in and is outselling some of the much larger developers. And just 2 months ago, Warren Buffett invested almost $1 billion in several of Coulter's competitors. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to invest in Coulter because they're private, but it just goes to show that Warren Buffett has also identified home building as a very attractive investment opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years. And this is a little more detail about some of the different competitors that Warren Buffett recently invested in, and a little bit about what the investment thesis is behind taking such a position in the same business model that Coulter is doing. For those who can visit the project, it's open 7 days a week, and we can arrange for you to come see it in person, tour all the model homes. For those outside of the US or who may not be able to travel to Atlanta to see the project, we have a new virtual driving tour that you can easily access online on our website. The details there on the right side. And these are a couple more of some of the most recent construction progress photographs of the project. And also on our website, we have a number of recent testimonials from investors who recently joined the project. So you can hear from other investors like yourself and hear them explain why they chose the Twin Lakes project after considering other available rural and non-rural projects in the market. And so before we wrap up, Corinne, could you share kind of some summary thoughts for French investors who are considering making an EB-5 investment? Why, based on your experience, what are your clients, typically looking for? What's motivating them to make this type of investment? And if they are seriously considering it, what should their next steps be in terms of seeing if they're potentially eligible or could qualify as an investor?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, EB-5 is becoming more and more attractive to folks in the U.S. on certain visa categories, depending on where they come from. Certainly, the green card process outside of EB-5 can be quite lengthy. We have a lot of individuals on student visas, for example, who for whom this is a great alternative. The H-1B, which is typically the professional visa, that the next logical step for students. There's quite not a backlog, but the quota, the demand for this H-1B far exceeds the supply of the visas that are available. And so as a result, we're seeing those on student visas run out of time rather than be forced to leave the United States. And they're really looking to the EB-5 to bypass the non-immigrant visa and go straight to it. So this is a really good investment option, and that's as you mentioned, having the ability to file not only the 560, but also the adjustment status for the work permit. Our document, which is properly, is really just to do it without any gap. It's certainly so as next step, obviously it's not like applying for an H-1B. There's a lot that's at stake. Capital needs to be raised, and certainly, as we spoke about today, the source of funds and the evidence that's required can be expensive. Le EB-5 devient de plus en plus attractif pour certains immigrants aux États-Unis qui peut-être des difficultés à obtenir d'autres visas comme le H-1B, et la demande aussi au-delà du nombre de visas disponibles chaque année. Ça devient de plus en plus difficile donc d'obtenir ce visa d'emploi. Et donc, pour ceux qui sont là, par exemple, aux États-Unis, en les visas d'étudiants, souvent doivent risquer de partir des États-Unis pour obtenir ce visa d'emploi. Et donc, le EB-5 leur donne une autre alternative attractive, comme les femmes, avec le EB-526E. On peut aussi déposer l'application pour la découverte, le gestion de marchandise, et cela vient avec une application de carte d'emploi et donc, si le timing est bon, l'étudiant peut recevoir donc, cette carte d'emploi avant de commencer ses études ou alors avant que je termine l'emploi sur la F1 pour les étudiants. C'est vraiment une bonne alternative. Ceci dit, bon, il faut trouver le capital de 800 000 et comme on a aujourd'hui, cela demande aussi de documentation dépendant des sources de